Kira's back ached as she lifted another stone into place on the eastern wall. Her hands were raw despite the worn gloves, and her swollen belly made every movement awkward. 7 months pregnant and still working the wall repairs. But slaves didn't get maternity leave. Slaves worked until they physically couldn't anymore, and Kira needed every copper coin she could earn before the baby came. Not that she'd earned much. Slaves were paid barely enough to eat, and Kira had been saving what little she could, hiding coppers in a cloth tied around her ankle. Maybe 15 coppers total. Enough for a week's food if she was careful. Not enough for a room, not enough for baby supplies, not enough for anything that mattered. "Move faster!" The overseer, Duncan, shouted from below. "That wall needs to be finished before the king's inspection tomorrow." Kira bit back a response and kept working. Duncan was cruel on his best days, and vicious when challenged. She'd learned years ago to keep her head down and her mouth shut. Survival meant invisibility. She repositioned another stone, mortar squishing between her fingers. The eastern wall was part of the castle's outer fortifications, the part that faced the forest. It had been damaged in recent storms and needed repair before winter set in. Kira had been assigned to the crew because she could climb and had steady hands. Pregnancy be damned. Below, she heard the other slaves working. There were 8 of them on this crew, all doing hard labor that would break most people. But slaves weren't people to the castle administration. They were tools, used until they broke and then replaced. Kira had been a slave for 12 years, since she was 10 years old. Her parents had been in debt, and when they died of fever, their debt had transferred to Kira. She'd been sold to Castle Iron Peak's workforce, where she'd been ever since. Cleaning, cooking, repairing, whatever needed doing. The work was hard, but she'd survived, until 6 months ago when she'd gotten pregnant. The father was another slave, a young man named Thomas who'd been kind to her. They'd found comfort in each other, brief moments of tenderness in an otherwise brutal existence. Then Thomas had been sold to another estate, and Kira had discovered she was carrying his child. She'd tried to get word to him but had no idea where he'd been taken. He didn't even know he was going to be a father. So Kira was alone, pregnant, enslaved, and alone, with no home beyond whatever corner she could find to sleep in each night. "Kira, stop daydreaming," Duncan's voice again, sharp with irritation. Kira refocused and kept working, even though her body was screaming for rest. The baby kicked against her ribs, as if protesting the treatment. "Soon," she thought. "Soon you'll be here and I'll figure out how to protect you." Somehow. She just had to survive until then. King Riker was restless. He'd been in council meetings all morning, discussing trade agreements and border disputes, and his wolf was clawing to get out. He needed air, needed movement, needed to escape the suffocating formality of the throne room. "I'm going for a walk," he announced, standing abruptly. His advisors exchanged glances. "Your Majesty, we still have the budget review." "Later. I need air." He left before anyone could protest. His guards moved to follow, but he waved them back. "I'm walking my own castle grounds. I don't need an escort." They bowed and let him go, though he knew they'd shadow him discreetly anyway. Fine, as long as they gave him space. Riker had been king for 15 years, since his father's death when he was 25. He'd taken the responsibility seriously, had worked to be a good ruler, fair and just. But lately, he'd felt disconnected from his own kingdom. Like he was ruling from behind a wall of advisors and protocol, never seeing the real lives of his people. He walked through the castle gardens, then along the inner walls, following his instincts more than any planned route. His wolf was guiding him somewhere, though he didn't know where or why. He ended up at the eastern wall, the outer fortifications he rarely visited. There was a repair crew working. He could hear voices and the sound of stone on stone. He climbed the stairs to the wall walk, curious to see the progress. What he saw stopped him in his tracks. A woman, heavily pregnant, was lifting stones into place on the wall. She was thin, too thin, her pregnancy making her look unbalanced and fragile. Her clothes were little more than rags. Her hands were bleeding through torn gloves, and she was working with a desperate efficiency that spoke of fear rather than dedication. Riker felt his wolf surge forward in his mind, a protective snarl. Who the hell was making a pregnant woman do hard labor? He moved closer, and the woman looked up. Their eyes met. Hers were dark brown, exhausted, wary. She looked at him without recognition, then quickly dropped her gaze and returned to work. She didn't know who he was, didn't recognize her own king. "You there!" Riker called out. "Stop working!" The woman froze, fear flashing across her face. Below, an overseer appeared, a burly man with a cruel face. "Your Majesty." The overseer bowed hastily. "We didn't expect you on this part of the wall." So the overseer recognized him even if the woman didn't. Riker focused on the man. "Why is a pregnant woman doing hard labor?" "She's a slave, Your Majesty. Slaves work." "She's pregnant, heavily pregnant. This is dangerous." "Begging your pardon, Majesty, but slaves don't get special treatment for being pregnant. She can work until the baby comes. Then she'll have a few days to recover before returning to duty." Riker felt rage building. "A few days?" "Standard policy, Majesty. We can't afford to lose workers for extended periods. This is my castle, my policy, and I'm changing it right now." Riker turned to the woman, who was watching the exchange with confusion. "What's your name?" "Kira, Your Majesty." Her voice was soft, hesitant. "Kira, come down from there. You're done working for today." "But Majesty, the wall can be finished by people who aren't 7 months pregnant. Come down, now." Kira climbed down carefully, her movements slow and awkward. Up close, Riker could see she was younger than he'd thought, maybe 22 or 23. She should have been in the bloom of health and life. Instead, she looked exhausted and beaten down. "Where do you sleep?" Riker asked. Kira blinked, confused by the question. "Wherever there's space, Majesty." "What does that mean? Where is your room?" "Slaves don't have rooms, Majesty. We sleep in the servants' hall, or in storage rooms, or sometimes in the stables, wherever we can find space." Riker stared at her. "You don't have a permanent place to sleep?" "No, Majesty." "And you're pregnant?" "Yes, Majesty." "Where did you sleep last night?" "In the grain storage, Majesty. It was warm and dry." Riker felt something crack inside his chest. This woman, pregnant and working herself to exhaustion, was sleeping in a grain storage because she had nowhere else to go. In his castle. Under his rule. And he'd had no idea. "Duncan," he said, his voice cold. "I want a full report on all slave living conditions by tomorrow morning. And I want to know who approved making pregnant women do hard labor." "Your Majesty, this is standard practice." "Then the standard practice ends today. Effective immediately, no pregnant women work hard labor. They're assigned to light duties only, and they get proper housing. Am I clear?" "Yes, Majesty." Riker turned back to Kira. "Come with me." "Majesty?" "I said come with me. You're not working anymore today." Kira followed him down from the wall, confusion and fear warring in her expression. Riker led her through the castle, ignoring the stares of servants and guards. He took her to the residential wing, to a section used for minor nobles and guests. "This room," he said, opening a door to a modest but comfortable chamber. "It's yours." Kira stared at the room. It had a real bed with clean linens, a fireplace, a chair, a window with actual glass. It was more luxury than she'd seen in 12 years. "I don't understand, Majesty." "You need somewhere to sleep, somewhere safe. This is it." "But I'm a slave. Slaves don't stay in the residential wing." You do now. And we're going to talk about this slave system, because clearly I've been failing as a king if people are sleeping in grain storage while pregnant. He gestured to the bed. Rest. I'll have food sent up. We'll talk more tomorrow. Majesty, I can't just stop working. Duncan will punish me. Duncan doesn't give orders anymore. I do. And I'm ordering you to rest. When was the last time you ate a full meal? Kira had to think about it. 3 days ago, maybe? I had some bread and cheese. 3 days! Riker felt that rage building again. You're eating for 2 and you haven't had a full meal in 3 days. Food costs money, Majesty. I'm saving for the baby. The baby who will be born to a mother who's starving. Riker moved to the door. Stay here. Rest. Food will arrive shortly. We'll talk tomorrow about long-term solutions. After he left, Kira stood in the middle of the room, trying to process what had just happened. The king himself had taken her off the wall, given her a room, promised her food. It didn't make sense. Kings didn't notice slaves. Kings certainly didn't help them. But she was too exhausted to question it. She sat on the edge of the bed, just for a moment, and the softness of the mattress nearly made her cry. When was the last time she'd slept on something soft? Years. Not since before she was enslaved. She meant to get up, to stay alert, in case this was some kind of trick, but her body had other ideas. Within minutes, Kira was asleep, truly asleep, for the first time in months. When she woke, there was food on the table by the window. Real food. Roasted chicken, vegetables, bread with butter, even fruit. And a note in elegant handwriting. Eat. Rest. We'll talk tomorrow. R. Kira ate slowly, savoring every bite. The baby kicked enthusiastically, as if celebrating the feast. After she finished, she washed her face and hands in the basin provided, changed into the clean shift someone had left, and climbed into the bed properly. The sheets were soft. The mattress was comfortable. The room was warm. For the first time in 12 years, Kira felt safe, and she cried herself to sleep, overwhelmed by the sudden kindness. Riker couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Kira, about her exhausted face and bleeding hands, and the casual way she'd said she slept wherever there was space. How had he not known? How had he ruled for 15 years and never realized his slaves were being treated like this? He'd always known there was a workforce of slaves in the castle. It was standard practice, had been for generations. People in debt were sold into service, working to pay off what they owed. It had seemed reasonable, a way to handle debt without imprisonment. But he'd never looked closely at how they were treated, had never asked where they slept, or what they ate, or how they were managed. He'd trusted his administrators to handle it humanely. Clearly, that had been a mistake. At dawn, Riker summoned his head of household, a stern woman named Marjorie, who'd been managing the castle staff since before Riker was born. "Tell me about the slaves," he said without preamble. Marjorie looked uncomfortable. "What would your Majesty like to know?" "Everything. How many do we have? Where do they sleep? What are they paid? What are their living conditions?" "We have approximately 200 slaves currently, Majesty. They sleep in common areas as space allows. They're paid a small stipend, enough for basic food. Living conditions are adequate for their station." "Adequate for their station," Riker repeated. "I found a pregnant woman sleeping in grain storage and working on the eastern wall. Is that adequate?" Marjorie had the grace to look ashamed. "That's unfortunate, Majesty, but not unusual. Slaves are expected to work until they physically cannot." "Even pregnant women?" "Pregnancy is not considered an exemption from work." "It is now. Effective immediately, all pregnant women are reassigned to light duties. No heavy lifting, no dangerous work. They get proper beds and designated housing, not sleeping wherever they can find space. And I want that housing established by the end of this week." Majesty. The cost. I don't care about the cost. We're one of the wealthiest kingdoms in the region. We can afford to treat pregnant women with basic human decency. Make it happen. After Marjorie left, looking troubled, Riker sent for Kira. She appeared in his study